First of all, I suppose I will disappoint you a little bit because I'm not going to speak about precision agriculture in the traditional sense of crop production, but I'll talk about precision agriculture applied to livestock production. And I hope that there is some parallels that you will see. And in fact, I will try and bring some parallels as we go through the talk. But I'll give a little bit overview of myself and the university first. And then I'll talk about the challenges that we face in terms of livestock production. And then some of the technologies. And I'd like to start about technologies that first went successfully on the market and give some limitations that we have seen with those technologies, and then some learnings from that to take us into the future. And we will, of course, start to lean more on the use of artificial intelligence to help us develop that future. That's the way we see it. So in terms of my university, we're based in Leuven in Belgium. It's a quite old university. This year it celebrates 600 years in existence. Of course, we're not that far away from Brussels. And there are some famous people like Erasmus and so on who are initial important people part of the university. And one of the standout points of our university, I would say, is that we're focused on innovation. So we have, of course, a very strong fundamental research focus, but when it comes to agriculture, biological engineering, biomedical engineering, we work a lot with industry and we take products to the market with industry. And that, for me, is a real selling point and part of the reason I stay at the KU Leuven. Okay, so let's go to the challenges that we face for the livestock sector. What I show on the right-hand side of this chart is basically the intensification of the sector that we see in Belgium now. This is the graph from the pig sector in Belgium. And what we see is the number of animals per farm have more or less doubled over the last 20 years. And meanwhile, the number of farms have more or less halved. It's a real consolidation of the sector. And it means that there is, of course, a lot of challenges that brings to farmers. In terms of health and welfare, we have problems with African swine fever, particularly down the south, and managing swine influenza. Welfare is also a big concern, of course, that you don't see in the crop sector. We have to deal with issues from activists who restrict what we try and do from the farming side, restriction of cages, some of which is good, but some of which really hinders the production of animals. And of course, there is this reliance on protein that's imported, and therefore there is this heavy carbon footprint. Not to mention, much of our livestock comes into focus when it comes to methane production. For instance, dairy cows are producing close to 80 megatons globally per year of methane, which is 25 times more powerful than CO2. And also the same with manure management. So these are big challenges that we face in the livestock sector. And on the same side, we have a limited number of young farmers coming in, particularly in Flanders. In part of Belgium I'm based in, there is about 15% replacement in terms of young farmers entering into the sector. So it's a challenge that we really see that needs solutions. And therefore, you know, there are some actions that have been recently taken across Belgium. First of all, the Flemish government said a couple of years ago that they want to shrink the sector, the pig sector, by a third before 2030. So they are basically subsidizing farmers to get out of business because, yeah, of course, we have an issue with emissions and pollution, and therefore that is causing them to take such an action. And the other action is more, we're starting now to build up more on the technology side. How can we enable farmers produce the same quantity of meat product, but reduce the emissions? And of course, we can think about that from different perspectives. We can see the developments coming from the angle of environmental control, so washing, for instance, methane or washing ammonia from the air before it leaves a barn. Feed efficiency, of course, is a very important one, improving the productivity, and I think in Belgium, across Europe, that will be a key focus and needs collaboration across the sector, of course, the main actor being the farmer in the end. And animal health and welfare. And I see these technologies coming under the banner of precision livestock farming, all of them, because they all have a part to play and they all aim to control in some way the negative aspects of animal farming. And we need engineers, biosystems or traditional agricultural engineer. I consider myself a traditional agricultural engineer, and we therefore need to blend technology and biology. And the biology is the core interest and the core knowledge. And that's why universities are needed, not just technologists, but universities to teach the biological principles that are either from the animal side or the crop side. It's key. And that connection then needs to happen with the technology. In terms of where precision agriculture traditionally is compared to precision livestock farming, of course, both are almost similar in terms we need to gather information on temporal and spatial scales that are much more higher than were in the past. So on a square meter scale, or even when it comes to livestock production on an animal level. So we aim to improve the resolution of the data that we're capturing. And that's why there is an absolute agreement between precision agriculture and precision livestock farming, indeed. But, you know, in the world of precision agriculture, some people believe there is a conflict, but in fact, we are thinking the same. In our world, particularly in our research group, we have this process model, which is coming again from the area of control, of management of processes. And we have an idea that the key process that we want to control is the animal. So we try and go towards the animal level, and we try and then measure as much as we can on the inputs and the outputs. So the inputs are the feed, medication, any interventions that we give to the animal, and the outputs are the response of the animal. So the growth response, the behavior response, these responses that are very important for the farmer. And of course, that part needs to be supported by the experts in ethology, genetics, and so on. So that's a very key scientific component. But the key part where we play a role is on the modeling side. So we try and bring that together with sensor data, that knowledge, so that it can really support what the farmer is monitoring on the farm, and develop models using that data. Of course, that data comes from a variety of devices. You will see you use the very same in crop production. For us, we see a lot of developments in the world of camera technology, microphones, and other sensors that you can attach to the animal. These devices produce information, of course, which needs to be reduced. Yeah, there is just so much data that's produced by these devices. It needs to be turned into valuable information. And that's the purpose of the modeling. And then we go to the next level. And the next level is really the engagement with the sector. It's really bringing the technology to the farmer. But of course, that requires good interaction with companies, and also a focus on what is the value of this information that we bring to the farmer. And of course, the accuracy. We as academics are interested in the accuracy part, but the value part is vitally important in the story. And that's why I have this slide, which I think was a very interesting finding a number of years ago. It was, okay, let's think about the kind of technologies we develop for farmers in terms of the value of information that it produces. And I think that was a really interesting thinking, because academics don't think that way generally. They want to solve an academic problem. But these researchers said there is two levels. Basically, there is a level where the farmer needs to know information that reduces the uncertainty in him quantifying what's happening on the farm. So he wants to reduce that uncertainty. That's level one. Level two is he needs to be able to use this data to take action, so to make changes on the farm, to do an intervention. So those two levels of data processing are needed, and of course they can be combined, and I think that's where we need to focus as academics, and also what we try and do in our research team to ensure the value is considered from the very beginning. Of course, the world of precision agriculture and precision livestock farming are not at odds. We use a lot of the same technologies, cameras, NIR, sensing. You use NIR for crops, we use it for feed. Cameras, we also use it for animals, for behavior, growth, you use it for crops. There is a lot of correspondence there in terms of the technology. But of course, there is one big difference. These guys are moving, and the crops are not moving. So you can be sure that when you return to the patch of ground later with the drone or robot, that same plant will be there unless it's harvested, of course. And you can measure and correspond the data from the historical data of that plant. It's not the same for animals. It's quite a challenge for us to get to the individual animal level. But I'll talk to you about some of the tools that we've developed to try and go there. But first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about technologies that have made it on the farm, actually, that are, you would consider it the state of the art in terms of application of modern technology, precision livestock farming technology. And one tool is what's called pig cough monitoring system. It was technology that started in development in 2012 in real action, and now it's gone to the market quite a while, but it's there supported by a major animal health company, Boehringer Ingelheim, and basically what it's doing is it's measuring the vocalizations, the coughing of the pigs in the shed, using microphone technology, and then applying a threshold to signal to the farmer that, yeah, the animals are sick, yes or no, because the coughing intensity has changed. And because the startup originally came from our research group, but because the startup was able to engage with Boehringer Ingelheim, who are a major, of course, animal health partner, so they had the market, effectively. They had the reach to the veterinarians who could do the distribution for them. So a small startup could get wide distribution by connecting with such a partner. And I think that really is something interesting for the future, because there are so many of these small companies that come and go because they can't get the distribution of the technology. And here it was a success, and now it's still going on the market. Of course, we support it. In our research team, we continuously support such technology by validating, and here is some data where we compare data from the slaughterhouse with the cough monitor measuring data on the farm. And we saw that indeed lung lesions were more prevalent in the data in the animals where we estimated had a high intensity of coughing. So we provide that kind of validation. It's interesting from a scientific perspective, but also it helps the company in improving their technology. The second application is something that maybe was less of a success, but something we learned a little bit more about. And it's flock monitoring, so chicken monitoring. And in broiler production, of course, it's interesting to know how the chicken flock is behaving or developing over time. You have a short period of time. It's 6 weeks of production. And if something goes wrong, you need to act very quickly. And that stimulated this technology. It was basically a camera technology that was looking to the behavior of the flock, so how they distributed themselves over the house, and how that changed over the full day period, of course, and if it was changing because of a health or welfare problem. And the technology was very simple. So basically, it was processing the changes in color or the changes in background of the image. So it was a very coarse kind of an indicator, but still it gave an indication of where is the flock in the house and how much is that flock moving around. And the initial engagement with farmers and the company showed that it actually was quite a useful technology to tell about the unrest level, the activity changes, and the clustering that might be related to a fault in the ventilation system or a fault in the feeder. And the initial engagement was interesting. But then, and this is maybe more information. Here it's like basically a graph that shows how the system was working. So on the left-hand side, you can see if the animals were evenly distributed in the house, well then you would get no alarm, which is shown here by the green line. But if the birds were poorly distributed, say there was a blocked feeder or poor ventilation, some problem with the ventilation system, then there would be an alarm issued to the farmer, yeah, and that's the red line here. And like I said, it was connected with a lot of different challenges. In fact, it was not specific enough. That's one of the problems. And because it was not specific enough, even though the technology was brought to the market in 2012, so it was brought via a company in 2012, because the initial engagement with farmers was interesting. After a period of 8 to 10 years, even before that they stopped their focus on it, they took it completely off the market. Because farmers couldn't handle that level of data. They did not know what to do with the data, how to take appropriate action. Because indeed, these alarms were linked with all the problems that were happening. Maybe it was just a patch of wet litter in the house, or maybe indeed it was a more serious problem, but the farmer didn't know how important the problem was. And therefore, it became an issue and it was taken off the market. So for us, the key interest and learning from this is how do we get more specific information to the livestock farmer, not this just general coarse indicators. So we see that being the future. We see like an integrated, and I say pig production because these days we're focused on pig production, but an integrated solution that can capture a whole range of indicators, but focus on the individual and therefore generate specific information about that individual. That's what we see the future being. And of course, there is a value chain in terms of who this brings value to in the whole solution. For instance, for us, one of the interesting things is to capture as much information on the productivity, health, and welfare in parallel with this kind of technology. I've said here cameras, but also I mentioned microphones and environmental sensing as well. But not all that data is immediately interesting for the farmer. There is an overlap that's interesting, but we need to get to that overlap. The first stage is finding the interested stakeholder. So the interested stakeholder can be the feed company or the genetics company. They are interested in the data. How well is their feed working on the farm? How well is their genetics working on the farm? They want to get to the data. They want accuracy, and that's how we see it. We work with companies who want that accurate data, but meanwhile we need to find the overlap that's relevant for the farmer. What is the tool that the farmer will be able to derive from this sophisticated technology? They're not interested in the technology. They want the core actionable advice. So at the moment, we focus a lot with the other stakeholders, and we have a lot of different indicators with a small amount of sensors. We focus at the moment on the camera technology, and we try and derive as much as possible from that technology. Of course, like I said, there is a huge amount of stakeholders, but the key stakeholders for us at the moment are the genetics companies and feed companies who are interested to test their genetics and feeds. So the computer vision technology, I'll just go very quickly through it. Over the last 20 years or so, it's made huge progression. You've also seen it in the crop world. In the 90s, people were applying it, but yeah, also the system I showed you, it was kind of offering low resolution solutions that really gained no traction or no interesting traction in the sector. But recently, with the advent of deep learning, new AI approaches, we see a huge amount of possibilities are popping up. Of course, they have limitations, but we can talk about those. But it's incredible the rate of development in this field, and we're jumping on it, and we want to make the most of it for the farmers. But of course, computer vision, like its AI approach, we have to make a trade-off. And the trade-off means we need to consider two sides of a balance, right? And one side is there's a huge variation in the data space. So there's a lot of variability in all of these farms. There is not one farm that you can go to that's the very same as the previous farm. So you want to develop models, but these models need to be generalized so that they work on completely different environments. That is one of the biggest challenges that we face, of course, that large data space, but it's not that, it can be dealt with. On the other side, and this is the most critical side, when we talk about deep learning AI, now you've heard about, DeepSeek is in the news recently, OpenAI's ChatGPT. You talk about billions of parameters. How do these things, for God's sake, run on a farm? It's not possible. We have to try and work down to a solution that can be used on a farm, on a hardware that's a low footprint, and also that has the additional benefit of a lower energy consumption. So we need to play that balance. We need to play this game to try and capture high accuracy, deal with this large variation in the data space, and do it in an efficient way. So we've developed a technology that can go across different farms. This is just an idea. It's based, we took the principles from YOLO, but then we developed on top of that to try and get these rotated bounding boxes that can tell us something about the orientation of the animal. And we have then developed on top of that a principle for tracking these animals over time efficiently, and all with a reasonably small footprint. And we've worked through it, and it's also published for people to make the most of it in the scientific literature. And yeah, doing it this way, you don't have to expect a geneticist or a breeding company or a feed company to go and follow individual pigs by marking them individually. Of course, a tracking solution like that can do it all automatically, and that's what we're working on, and that's the solution we have available. And yeah, in the literature, you can also read that it's working at least 3 times better than the technology that's out there currently. So that's a kind of solution that we're developing. In terms of production monitoring, we can capture various different indicators of relevance for the farmer. So feed visits, drinker visits. He can detect if there is issues with the feeding regularity of the animals, the feeding patterns. And also what we've found is this technology, it's a deep learning approach, but a very efficient deep learning approach, is more accurate than the ethologist, than this animal scientist. So it's something we can stand over. It can, from the animal behavior side, although it's something that we need to work further on to bring to the farmer level, we can capture, of course, different indicators of behavior. And yeah, this is valuable information on the welfare aspect. Tail biting is another key problem that we see and also can be integrated, and that's what we're working on, bringing the tail biting issue into this overall solution. And there you need accurate tracking, but you need accurate behavior monitoring as well. So this stuff is under development, and of course, hopefully we can bring it to the level that it's first of all useful for geneticists and in the future then farmers. So what to expect? So from the computer vision side, I know I need to hurry up a little bit here. Another key aspect is the production efficiency. That means monitoring the growth of the animal. So in the crop world, you need to monitor the growth of crops, and you also need to prescribe nutrients according to that. We also need this, we also have this challenge and need to find a solution. And so coming up with a precision feeding approach for pigs has also been an ambition in our group, along with the welfare part that I just showed you. And of course, precision feeding requires sensing of a key indicator that tells us about the development of the animal, the growth of the animal, and then a prescription of the nutrients in the appropriate amount to reach the efficiency target of that individual animal, to do it on an individual level. So precision feeding is also something that you see, and that in the crop world, you have precision fertilizer application. This is more or less a parallel application in the livestock field. We use this, this control approach that I presented to you in the beginning to try and address that. And of course, what you see, and this is the results of some of our research, is that for every individual animal, they get a different prescription. So in the livestock farm, each animal is performing at their own rate. They have an individual efficiency. And therefore, if you can monitor on that individual level, you can indeed feed according to the efficiency of that individual. And that's what we see here, that these individuals, represented by the dots here, received a different composition and amount of feed according to their demands. And we demoed this technology and tried to come up with feed margins to estimate what was the value of this technology to the farmer. And we demonstrated it to the industry, but still industry were afraid to make the jump in terms of the infrastructure required to make it all work. So the hardware and the software integration and the cost that this is it's quite a big investment for industry. So that's why you don't see this technology yet on the market. So it still has a bit to go. So I'm running over time, so I'll just briefly go through this. So what I see in terms of the future, and you will see it more from the crop world as well, is the development of these digital twins, where you see the actual growth of the crop or the growth of the animal coming onto a digital platform. The models that are supporting this will also be on the platform, and therefore there will be a continuous engagement with what is happening in the real world and what can happen with different scenarios in the future. And I think this is really vital in a time where we have a lot of issues with climate change. Yeah, if we can predict how farmers can respond in advance of that problem, that climate action, well then perhaps we can help them to be more robust in the future. So this is a kind of interesting approach that can happen, and I think this is all being enabled by the collaboration between industry and academia. Of course, we don't want all this farmer to deal with all these plethora of solutions, but one kind of platform that enables the capturing and utilization of these tools is what we need in the future. Okay, so just to conclude, like I said at the beginning, there are interesting commercial technologies, some of which were a success, some of which were not a success, but we can learn from in the future. It's difficult, it's expensive, and the value sometimes is hard to quantify. And that means it's difficult for young startup companies or technologists to bring it to the market. But of course, a key part of all of this story is the collaboration, and I said that at a number of points in the talk. The academic and industry collaboration, public-private partnership is essential to bring it forward. That biological component, it needs to be integrated in the system. It's not pure data-driven, but that the principles of biology need to be integrated. So that's my belief. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and of course, if there are time for questions, I'll be willing to answer. Thank you.